We won't wait.
We won't be paralyzed by what we see.
We won't run. We'll conjure up the courage we need to create solutions for our homeland.
Our
Africa.
We are #DIY Africa.
Welcome to #DIY Africa, presented by the Civic Tech Innovation Forum and Gemfest.
Grace, any thoughts on how the civic tech and digital rights landscape has evolved during COVID-19? And the second part of the question, which explores how, if there's any scaling for organization capital and funding.
Thanks, Ashna. I think I want to start with the last one and tell Howie that the issue of funding, actually the issue of resources, continues to remain a challenge, especially for digital organizations that are working. Oh, sorry, I switched off my camera. For digital organizations that are working on digital rights, and therefore, we see donors have not changed, especially those who fund this work. And so, they keep changing their priorities. So you find every 3 years, there's a change of priority. And I think because I don't have hard and fast answers, the question that we should be asking ourselves and having honest conversations about is this question of, how can then organizations or even people be well-resourced in ways that they are able to respond to emerging issues and in a timely fashion. We know that digital rights, just like in the same way as the internet, the way the internet continues to evolve, the way the internet is dynamic, we've also seen that in the same way with digital rights. They continue to evolve practically every new day, and there are new challenges that come up every time. So how do we all respond to that? And I think that's a question I have no answers to, but it's a question that we must agree to discuss honestly. Now, during COVID, we have actually seen a lot of, more people embrace use of online spaces. For example, schools have, more schools were forced to teach on online platforms. Hospitals, some were forced to prescribe medication online or through the phone because they also did not want people to go to hospitals to avoid catching, COVID. But what does this mean to people who have no access? So we continue to see that the issue of access actually has continued to be widened, because even in places like, let me give the example of Kenya, there was internet in Nairobi and in the cities, but in the rural areas, we just found that children could not attend the online classes. And so that brought in an issue of access. Why were they not able to get online? It's because they were not able to access either platforms. It's because maybe the internet was expensive and therefore raised the issue of affordability. And therefore inclusion actually has continued to increase during that, and especially to highlight the issue of the have-nots and the haves in terms of, the digital ecosystem. So I think for us in the sector and those of us who are working in this is a lesson. And I think it's a wake-up call that we cannot continue, we can't afford to be comfortable, that we must always be prepared to, respond to emerging needs. And like the joke, that is always made about, that in 2015, everyone who was asked to predict where do you want to see yourself in 5 years from now, that they all gave wrong predictions because nobody actually spoke about COVID in 2020. I think the other thing that has emerged during COVID, it's the whole issue of as yes, there were these people who never utilized online platforms, but you have these who utilized the platforms, and therefore we continued, and we continue to see a rise in cyber incidents that affected people in really small ways. So, for example, in Kenya, where there's so much use of M-Pesa, we found that there were new fraud cases being, happening on the phone. So, somebody sends you a message, it looks real. They have sent you money. Somebody says they have sent you actually money. They made a mistake, they missed one number, and that money ended up in your account. And if you are not careful, if you have a good heart, you found yourself returning that money, yet it was not true that money was actually being taken from you. There were all these fraud cases. The government is distributing these to help people sign on to this. But before, you can benefit, you need to pay a certain amount of money as admin fee, administration fee. So we've seen a lot of rise in cyber cases, and therefore we need, people's cyber rights actually were being breached just using the very same devices that we have said allow for access and allow for the digital rights. So, the issue of balancing actually then becomes very clear. For example, it raises the issue of awareness. And I guess that's a task for those working in this sector, raising awareness for those who don't know. A lot of education on this, on what are digital rights and where do we draw the line, and so forth. We also had during COVID, I think, a rise in, young girls and school girls, becoming pregnant, and many of them, who I interviewed said they met the culprits on social media, and because they were home for so long, and they had maybe a phone or they had access to the social media, then we found that this, their rights were actually being breached because, these were fraudsters posing as legitimate people, as genuine people, and they ended up, cheating these girls.
We'll do it ourselves. We are #DIY Africa.